Hi guys, this is Money Mike. Today I will show you how I personally keep track of all 380 plus specs that are currently on the market, what tools I use, and what you should really keep your eyes on if you are tracking specs. To give you just a small example of what I will show you in this video, here is the data that you can get off SPAC sheet. Let's say that you want to buy a SPAC that targets healthcare and you want to buy the biggest one by the market cap, but you don't want to overpay, let's say for the warrants or for the stock price. So you can selectively buy only those that are below $11. As simply as that, you can browse the data of SPACs. So what I'm going to do is that I will open this SPAC mega sheet, and don't get overwhelmed by the amount of information. I will explain everything. We will go through all the columns one by one, and I will explain why it is important to keep this specific information and possibly where to find them. So even if you, let's say you want to create your own spreadsheet, this video should give you the answers to that as well. But let me tell you, it's a lot of information to keep track of. It's not worth it to do it by yourself. Trust me, I am doing it, so I know how much time consuming it really is. So I can only recommend you to use some already available sources like this spreadsheet. So assuming that you are watching this video, you should already have an idea what SPAC is and also what is a SPAC warrant, for which I've made an in-depth video, so you can go and watch it in case you don't know. Okay, we will start with the first column, and here is just a disclaimer. My SPAC mega sheet is not to provide a trading data. There are data that are incorrect and I fix them every time that I find them, but it is just a lot of data. This tool should be used only as a sort of a finder and overview over the SPAC market, but you should always verify before you buy any ticker and any warrant. So obviously the first column, SPAC ticker, is the ticker of the SPAC for the common stock price. You can see that this spreadsheet has about 400 SPACs available. So let's skip the second column and let's go straight to the warrant ticker and to units ticker. So these three tickers you are going to be using in case you want to trade this company before the merger. So if you want to trade the common stock, you are going to look at the SPAC ticker in the first column and then in the column of the stock price. But if you want to trade warrants or units, you will look at the column warrant ticker and unit ticker, and right next to that you have the current price. Not every price for every warrant and ticker is available at this moment. It is either because it is not trading anymore or because simply this spreadsheet is not capable to take this data at this moment. So again, if you don't know what is warrant, if you don't know what is unit, I recommend you to watch the video about warrants. So if you want to trade the common stock, there are multiple columns that are supporting trading the common stock. And these columns you should be already familiar with if you are trading with the ordinary stock, for example, Tesla, Hyliion, whatever stocks. So you have here columns 90-day chart, which is showing the price movement over the 90 past days. And then you have the column change from the last close, which is showing the difference between the price before and after the close. In the next column, you can see the change, but it is in percentage value. The next column is showing total shares issued, which is helping you to understand how many shares are out there. And then we have market capitalization, which should be equal total shares issued, multiply the stock price, and you should get the total value of that current SPAC. In the next column, we can see 52 weeks high, which means the highest price over the past 52 weeks. And we can also see the lowest price over the 52 weeks. And then we can see the same columns just in the percentage values. In the next column, you can see the volume or the average shares traded in that particular month. The higher the volume, more people are buying it or selling it. And also you can see the 90-day chart of the volume Okay, so these were the absolute basics. This is something what you probably already know. So let's get to the more specific data. So in the third column, you can see the status of SPACs, which currently we can see that we have 3 status: searching, which means that the SPAC is currently searching for the target, or that we have merger announcement, which means that this company went from the searching to merger announcement and they found the target which they would like to merge with but didn't do yet. And then we have merged, which means that the ticker basically changed from the SPAC to the new company, and the company is basically becoming the combination of those companies. And merger means that the company actually combined with the SPAC and is trading publicly under its new ticker. Sometimes it is useful to know from this column SPAC company name, because not every time if you put the SPAC ticker in SEC filings, you will find the company which you want. So for this, you can find a SPAC company name here and you can search based on this name of the company. So before the SPAC actually finds someone to merge with, there is some data which you want to keep eyes on. The first, I would say, is the SPAC IPO date. This is the date when the SPAC announced that it is searching for some company. So basically, this is the date when the SPAC filed S1 filings and when announced to the world that they are going to be searching for some target. With that, right next to that, we have the current deadline, which means usually it is 24 months, not always, but this is the date until the company said that they will be looking for the merger, and until that date they have the time to do so. And this column is basically calculating from those 2 previous columns how much time is there left. So sometimes the date will come very close to the deadline, and this is where you should start to wonder whether it will even happen, because we did have cases before in history that these mergers actually didn't happen and the SPAC had to cancel its operation. Okay, so when the SPAC file IPO, they announce in the S1 filing at the same date which target sector they are actually targeting, which means in which sector they will most likely find a merger. I will skip some columns because before the merger announcement, you would like to actually know how big is the SPAC. And the size of the SPAC sometimes is getting credit for how interesting the deal is going to be. So if we would talk about the biggest SPAC, PSHT, which is the Bill Ackman SPAC, it is already getting a lot of traction because it is one of the biggest SPACs, if not the biggest, and that excites people to invest in that company as well as the team. And this is where you want to look at the market capitalization of the SPAC and you want to compare it to the trust value from the last filling. In order to understand this column, you should understand that every SPAC is giving majority of their money into the trust fund. Trust fund is something that should feel investors safe because these money are invested, for example, in securities. So why this column is important compared to the market capitalization is that you want to always make sure that the value of the SPAC is somewhere equal to the money that are currently in a trust fund. In other words, you always want to invest in SPACs that their trust fund didn't decrease in value comparably to the market capitalization of the SPAC. This is really just protecting you from some kind of a fraudulent behavior or from unresponsible money movement. So the column next to that is actually showing you the decrease between the market capitalization of the SPAC and the last trust fund value from the quarterly report. Okay, so these are one of the most important information that you want to find out before the company even find announcement. But there is one more important information to understand, and that is how units and warrants are exercised. So again, if you don't understand how units and warrants are exercised, I recommend you to go watch video about warrants and you will find out how they exercise them. So this column really tells you how many warrants you need in order to exercise it into the one stock and how much you would pay for exercising warrants into the one stock. What this column will also tell you is how many stocks and warrants you are getting after splitting the units. Most common would be 1 stock and 1/2 of the warrant, or 1/3 of the warrant, and so on. You can see it described here. So in this example, you can see that if you would buy 1 unit, you would get 1 stock and 1.5 warrant. And usually only the whole warrants are exercisable. So you always want to make sure that you are buying 2 units, because with the 2 units you would get 2 stocks and 1 whole warrant, which then you can exercise into the 1 stock for $11.5. So this is really how you read this column. And this is very important, because if you will look at the warrant prices and you would look for the warrant prices that are ratio 1:1, you basically are looking at the end value of the warrant. But if you would look at the warrant that have ratio 2:1, that means that you need 2 warrants in order to exercise them into the 1 stock. And then you want to look at the price of the warrant, as it would be 2 times expensive. So if warrant will be $1, then you want to think of it as a $2 in case the warrant have a ratio 2:1. All right, let's move on. Let's see what happens if company actually find announcement. So this column, the status, will change from searching to merger announcement. And the most important information is with which company this SPAC is merging. So you can see it filled in this column. And in the next column, you can see the link to the presentation, so you would actually understand what this company is about. So now we will look at one of the most important column in this spreadsheet, and that is the date when the announcement was made. What you have to understand about this column is that there are many types of announcement. There is a letter of intent, there is a potentially merger announcement, and then we have also rumors. So this column doesn't really represent any of that, it represents everything, which means that if there is a rumor that is out of the market, this date is going to represent that day when the rumor got out and when it significantly changed the price. This is important so you would understand that when there was a spike, there was some information out there that actually caused this spike in the price. And this is very important in order to understand the historical data of SPACs. So if the company announced the first merger, then usually what happens is that the company is going through the negotiations, which usually can last 1 or 3 months. And then we would usually want to see the merger announcement, which is basically in this spreadsheet the day of trading of the new ticker, because this is usually the biggest catalyst and this is usually the biggest stock movement up or down. Now, once the company find a merger, you also want to understand these 2 columns, which is a SPAC ticker and SPAC warrant ticker, which mean what ticker it will trade after the merger, which is quite important in order you want to find your company in your portfolio, or if you just want to check the stock price. So now just a short comment of where you can find this information, and where you would find those information is basically SEC filings. Most of the data here in the spreadsheet you will find in S1 filing, where you will find what this SPAC is targeting, what is the size of the SPAC, and so on. So, and then you have to understand that the second source of information about the SPAC announcement, it is really all internet, because the rumors could be published almost anywhere and SEC filings is not always on time. So you really should just spread your network over the internet and just watch out what is the news about SPAC announcement. The second kind of information that you can guess that there is a movement and announcement is the movement of the SPAC prices and also the warrant prices. So now that we acquired all this data, let's right now talk about what you can actually do with this data. Let's do some basic sorting and making some averages from this spreadsheet. And this is really the whole idea of why I am actually gathering all the data. So let's say that you want to invest in the biggest SPAC on the market. So what you will do is that you will sort the market capitalization of the whole sheet, and you basically sorted all SPACs by the biggest valuation to the lowest. So you can see that the biggest is currently PSTH, which is the Bill Ackman SPAC. So you can see that the current valuation is 5.8 billion. So you can really pick your best and biggest SPAC. The second very popular thing which you can do with this spreadsheet is find the cheapest SPAC sorted by the closest SPAC to the near asset value. So if you will see these videos about 5 cheapest SPACs, closest to the $10. So this is basically what you want to look for. You will sort the stock price by the lowest to the highest. So you will find that the cheapest SPAC is actually $9.3, which is under the $10 value. So there are definitely SPACs that are near $10, and you can take advantage of that because $10 is considered as the bottom floor of where the stock price can drop before the merger. Another way you can look at the SPACs is that, let's say you want to find out which SPAC is the oldest SPAC that didn't yet fund merger. So we will sort this by basically the IPO date from the oldest to the newest, which actually didn't find announcement yet. So in this case, it's one of these companies, ANDA, AGBA, and so on. These companies are either a big risk because they might not find a merger, or they're the biggest opportunity because they might be the closest to actually find a merger. And you can also combine multiple criteria. So we are coming to original example. Let's say that you want to buy a SPAC that is targeting healthcare. So I will search in the target sector that contains the word healthcare. And let's say that you want to buy the biggest one, right? The biggest market capitalization SPAC. So we will also sort it out by the market capitalization. And from this, we can see that the biggest healthcare right now currently on the market SPAC that didn't announce yet merger is SVAC with $1 billion. And then there's long time nothing. And then you have SPACs around $500 million. So now also let's think that you don't want to overpay. So you can select those SPACs that are actually the best value right now, that are closest to the $10 value, or you can buy warrants. So this is what you could do with the multiple criteria. You can really select whatever you are targeting, whatever you believe that will have the best potential for the merger. So this is why it is important to keep track of this data. There is much more complicated requests which you can do on this type of data. Some of those criteria I am sharing with my Patreons because I really believe that they are part of my strategy and they are the reason why I have such good results with the SPACs. So there is really much more to that, and the limit is really just your imagination. All right, I hope you learned something today. If you want to know more about what SPACs I trade or how I actually trade them as a strategy, just subscribe. Also, that SPAC mega sheet that you could see in the video, that is available for my Patreon. So join me there if you actually want to keep track of them and you don't want to do all it by yourself. And with that, see you guys next time.